In this video, we will uncover 5 of the most disturbing cases of police officers facing tragic fates. These true stories highlight the extreme dangers that come with wearing the badge, both on and off duty. From chilling murders to mysterious disappearances, these cases reveal the dark and often deadly side of law enforcement. Join us as we explore the shocking details and heartbreaking ends of these brave men and women who paid the ultimate price while serving and protecting their communities, even when they weren't officially on the clock.
In just a few days, we'll mark 20 years since 9/11, and on that tragic day, 23 NYPD officers died in the line of duty. One of them, the only female. She left behind a husband, a 2-year-old daughter, and grateful survivors who she helped save.
It was the morning of September 11th, 2001. For one NYPD officer, Moira Smith, it was the day she stepped into history. What she did in those final hours still echoes through the hearts of a grieving city. Moira wasn't just another officer. She had courage. She was fearless, a steady force in a city that never sleeps. She lived in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, with her husband Jim, also a cop, and their 2-year-old daughter Patricia. Her life was full of duty, love, and service. But that morning, everything changed. She saw the first plane hit the North Tower, and without a second thought, Moira ran toward the chaos. She was one of the very first to reach ground zero. Sirens blared, smoke filled the sky. People were screaming, running in every direction. But Moira ran into the South Tower. Inside that crumbling building, she became a beacon in the dark. Witnesses remember her clear, commanding voice, firm, calm, impossible to ignore. One survivor, Martin Glenn, would later say that her presence kept panic from turning deadly. She wasn't just giving orders, she was saving lives with every breath. There's a haunting photograph, Moira guiding a bloodied man named Ed Nichols to safety. It's the last image the world has of her, because she didn't stop. She went back in, again and again, risking everything to pull more people out. She was inside the South Tower when it collapsed at 9:59 a.m. She never came out. Moira's remains wouldn't be found until March of the following year, but her memory didn't fade. The NYPD awarded her the Medal of Honor, their highest recognition. Glamour and Miss Magazine named her Woman of the Year. The police, Women's Endowment Association did too, because even in death, Moira stood as a symbol of everything good about the badge she wore. But it's her daughter Patricia's story that brings the heartbreak full circle. Just 2 years old when she lost her mother, Patricia would grow up with that weight. She was photographed accepting Moira's Medal of Honor at Carnegie Hall, dressed in red velvet, barely old enough to understand what it meant. But she never forgot. She grew into an athletic trainer at Tulane University, and in 2016 she did something unimaginable. She flew to Guantanamo Bay to look into the eyes of Walid bin Attash, one of the terrorists accused of helping orchestrate the attacks that killed her mother. She didn't flinch. Her father, Jim, called it one of his proudest moments. He knew that Moira's courage lived on in their daughter. Patricia has pledged to attend as many of Attash's court hearings as possible. It's her way of fighting for justice, of keeping her mother's spirit alive. Jim Smith, now a retired officer, has become a fierce voice against political figures who talk of defunding the police. He doesn't mince words. He believes that anyone who turns their back on law enforcement has no right to wrap themselves in 9/11's memorials and call themselves allies of heroes. On the 20th anniversary of the attacks, he and Patricia stood together honoring Moira, remembering not just how she died, but how she lived.
Plaque in Peeler Park honoring a fallen Nashville officer. You can see it here. This plaque, and benches honor former officer Eric Mumaw. He died in 2017 while trying to save a woman who drove her car into the Cumberland River.
It was a February night in 2017 when Nashville Metro Police Officer Eric Mumaw received the kind of call no officer ever takes lightly. A woman was threatening to take her own life at the Peeler Park boat ramp, right by the murky, fast-moving waters of the Cumberland River. Eric, an 18-year veteran of the force, had faced danger before, but something about this call felt different. Julie Glisson was the woman in crisis. By the time Eric and his fellow officer Nick Diamond arrived, they found her in her car, parked at the very edge of the ramp, headlights pointing into the dark water, her foot pressed down on the brake. One slip, one wrong move, and that vehicle would slide straight into the river. They tried to talk to her. Eric had done this before. He'd saved people before. His voice, steady and full of care, tried to reach her, pull her back from the edge. For a moment, it seemed like they were getting through. The driver's side door opened. There was a pause. Hope hung in the air. And then, it happened. The car jerked forward. Julie had suddenly thrown it into gear. Whether panic or resolve pushed her to do it, no one will ever fully understand. But what followed was chaos. The vehicle lunged into the freezing water. Eric and Nick were pulled in with it, caught off guard. Their feet swept out from under them by the car's weight and the river's force. Nick managed to break free, struggling back to shore with Julie. But Eric was pulled deeper. The river took hold of him and didn't let go. Officer Trent Craig, watching helplessly from the bank, sprinted along the shore and then dove in without hesitation, hoping to reach his brother in blue. But the water was frigid, biting at his skin, the current too strong. He was neck deep and getting nowhere. In a heart-wrenching decision no one ever wants to face, Trent had to turn back. Eric was gone from sight, swept farther into the darkness. Rescue teams arrived quickly. Firefighters, boats, helicopters. But the minutes stretched into hours, and hope began to fade. Eventually, divers found Eric's body roughly 70 yards from where the car had gone under. He had drowned, giving everything he had in an effort to save someone he didn't even know. Julie survived. She and Officer Nick were taken to the hospital. Nick recovered and was released. Julie, however, faced the weight of what she had done. Authorities charged her with aggravated vehicular homicide by intoxication. She later pled guilty and was sentenced to the maximum, 12 years behind bars. Her license was revoked for 10, but the legal outcome didn't bring back Eric Mumaw. The Metro Nashville Police Department awarded Eric the Medal of Valor posthumously, their highest honor, but his true legacy lives beyond medals and plaques. 3 years later, the city erected a permanent memorial at Peeler Park, just feet from where the river claimed his life.
Sergeant Barbara Finley was killed when helping people evacuate from the Eastland Complex fire in West Texas. The wildfire has destroyed at least 50 homes and burned more than 45,000 acres as firefighters battle high winds fueling the blaze.
In March 2022, Eastland County, Texas was swallowed by fire. The wind howled. Flames danced across the landscape like a living thing. Relentless, fast, hungry. Entire communities watched in disbelief as homes, schools, businesses, everything they had built over generations, were reduced to ash. People had minutes to escape, some only seconds. The sky turned black, the air thick with smoke as evacuations began in a rush against time. And in the middle of this chaos, one woman didn't run away from the danger. She ran straight into it. Deputy Sergeant Barbara Finley of the Eastland County Sheriff's Office had one mission: make sure everyone got out alive. She worked traffic control, helped evacuate neighborhoods, and cleared the roads for fire trucks. But when she heard about an elderly resident who might still be trapped in the path of the inferno, she didn't hesitate. She jumped into her vehicle and drove straight toward the fire. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Her family tried to call her. Nothing. The radio fell silent. Hours passed with no word. The fire was still too aggressive, the smoke too thick for a proper search, and all they could do was wait, hope, pray. Once the flames had calmed enough, search teams moved in. What they discovered painted a picture of quiet, desperate courage. Barbara had not just checked on one person. She had gone door to door, trying to warn as many residents as she could. Urging them to leave, trying to buy them time, she kept pushing forward through choking smoke and suffocating heat. Then, on a rural stretch near FM 2526, something went wrong. The smoke was too thick. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. In those terrifying moments, navigating blind through the haze, Barbara's vehicle veered off the road, right into the jaws of the wildfire. By the time rescuers found her, it was too late. Her vehicle was burned out, her body still inside. She had never called to say goodbye. Barbara was just 51, a mother, a grandmother, a wife, and a protector to people she didn't even know by name. She'd started her law enforcement career in 2003 as a patrol officer in Gorman, the town where she was born and raised. By 2007, she became the city's chief of police, leading with heart and grit until 2013. After that, she joined the Eastland County Sheriff's Office, working quietly and diligently at the courthouse. But titles didn't define her. Actions did. When fire threatened to wipe out everything, Barbara did what only the bravest do. She ran toward those who needed help. Not because it was her job, because it was who she was. News of her death hit the community like a wave of grief. The governor ordered flags to fly at half-staff, calling her sacrifice what it was, the ultimate act of service. Tributes poured in from every corner of the state. Colleagues and friends remembered her passion for the job, her fierce dedication to helping others, and her unwavering love for the people she served. At her memorial in Cisco, the Myrtle Wilkes Community Center overflowed. Between 1,500 and 2,000 mourners gathered, many of them in uniform. They stood in silence, heads bowed, hearts heavy. She left behind a husband, 3 children, and 2 grandchildren, along with a legacy that refuses to fade. In the aftermath, voices across the county called for a permanent tribute, renaming a stretch of FM 2526 in her honor, the very road where she gave her life trying to save others.
Harvey is now being blamed for the death of a Houston police officer who authorities say drowned after his patrol car became trapped in high water while driving to work.
On August 25, 2017, the skies over Houston turned violent. Hurricane Harvey, a monstrous Category 4 storm, tore into the city like a living force, dumping billions of gallons of water on streets, homes, and lives. And just 2 days into this chaos, one man made a decision that would define his legacy. Sergeant Steve Perez, a 34-year veteran of the Houston Police Department, woke up long before dawn. The storm hadn't passed. The rain was still falling in sheets. The streets outside looked more like lakes than pavement. His wife begged him not to go. So did his father-in-law. "It's too dangerous," they said. "Stay, just this once." But Steve was not the kind of man to stay behind when others were in danger. At 4 a.m., he kissed them goodbye and walked out into the storm. He spent over 2 hours trying to get to his duty station. Every route he tried was blocked. Bridges underwater, roads crumbled. Entire intersections were flooded chest high. Still, he didn't give up. Following department protocol, he radioed dispatch and said he would reroute to a secondary location in Kingwood. That would be his last transmission. And then, silence. Amid the madness of Harvey's aftermath, no one noticed he hadn't arrived. The radios were busy. The city was crying out for help. It wasn't until August 28th, 3 days after he vanished, that a senior officer called roll and realized something was wrong. Steve was missing. His fellow officers immediately jumped into action. They called his phone, no answer. Tried the radio in his car, nothing. When they reached his wife, her voice cracked. He hadn't come home. Hadn't called, hadn't sent a single message since the moment he left. Search teams began scouring the city, retracing every possible route he might have taken. They focused their efforts near Hardy Tollway and Beltway 8, where floodwaters still sat deep and still, swallowing everything beneath them. But the area was too dangerous to search by night. They waited. The next morning, the Houston Police Department dive team returned to the area. Hours passed. Then came the call no one wanted to hear. They had found him. Steve's body was still inside his patrol car, submerged beneath 16 feet of floodwater. The current had swept him away as he tried to drive through an underpass. The official cause of death? Drowning. He died just 2 days before his 61st birthday. Steve Perez wasn't just a police officer. He was a quiet force of good, steady, kind, and fiercely devoted to his city. In his 34 years of service, he'd worked across nearly every division in the department: juvenile, emergency communications, crime analysis, special operations, and traffic enforcement. His fingerprints were on every part of Houston's safety net. To his colleagues, he was the heart of the department, a gentle protector, the kind of man who showed up early, stayed late, and never asked for credit. To his family, he was everything. His son Maverick later said, "He was the most excellent protector, defender, and rescuer. His love was pure, endless. He made me believe I could do anything." His death shook the entire city. At his memorial, a riderless horse led the procession. Helicopters soared overhead in salute. A final radio call echoed through the airwaves, breaking every heart that listened. He had given his life doing what he had always done, protecting others, even when it meant sacrificing himself. He was buried at the Houston National Cemetery, laid to rest among heroes. In the weeks that followed, Houston mourned. Strangers, people who had never met Steve, opened their wallets and poured out their gratitude. A GoFundMe organized by the Sergeants Benevolent Association raised nearly $20,000 for more than 300 donors. Messages of support flooded in. It was the morning of October 29, 2013, in Asheville, North Carolina. Officer Robert Bingaman was behind the wheel of his patrol car heading across the Captain Jeff Bowen Bridge. Without warning, Robert lost control of his vehicle. His patrol car suddenly veered, smashed through the bridge's guardrail, and plunged more than 50 feet before slamming onto Riverside Drive beneath. Metal crumpled, glass shattered. People nearby ran toward the wreckage, dialing 911 as they moved. Rescue teams rushed to the site within minutes, but what they found was a nightmare. The patrol car was barely holding on. teetering at a dangerous angle, its rear end threatening to slide further and collapse under its own weight. Any misstep could tip the vehicle again and finish what the fall had started. Firefighters and paramedics didn't hesitate. They moved with urgency and precision, managing to anchor the rear of the crushed cruiser to a bridge piling. Only then could they even begin to work safely. Bit by bit, they pried open the mangled doors, fighting through twisted steel and shattered dreams. Inside, they found Robert, gravely injured, barely hanging on. They did everything they could, but it wasn't enough. Robert Bingaman succumbed to his injuries shortly after they pulled him from the wreckage. The investigation that followed was somber and difficult. State Highway Patrol officials later confirmed that Robert had been speeding when the accident occurred. He hadn't activated his lights or siren, and tragically he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. The pieces didn't fit the image of the disciplined, cautious officer that his peers and family knew, and that only deepened the sorrow. Some began to look beyond the crash itself. There had always been whispers about the Captain Jeff Bowen Bridge. It carried nearly 1 million cars every day, feeding traffic from both a city street and an interstate onto one chaotic path. Drivers were often forced to change lanes rapidly, some accelerating, others braking, with little room to maneuver. Near misses were common. Accidents, too. Many believed the design of the bridge itself was a factor in Robert's tragic fall. But there were no answers, just questions and grief. The streets Robert once patrolled had claimed him, and no one knew exactly why. He was just 37 years old. For 6 years, Robert Bingaman served Asheville with quiet strength. As part of the department's traffic safety unit, he investigated accidents, taught road safety, and worked tirelessly to make the roads safer for everyone. Before the badge, he wore a uniform of a different kind. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps as an auto mechanic, stationed at Camp Lejeune. He left the military with the rank of sergeant and a reputation for being steady, dependable, and respected. That sense of duty followed him everywhere, even off the clock. Robert volunteered in his community, showed up for charity events, helped his neighbors, and gave more than he ever took. He was the kind of man who stayed after others went home, who put others first, even when no one was watching. That's why his death hit so hard, so deep. He wasn't just another officer. He was a symbol of the service and sacrifice that so often go unnoticed until it's too late. Hundreds packed his memorial service. Fellow officers stood at attention. Veterans saluted. Friends and family wept quietly as bagpipes played. The silence in the room said everything words couldn't. He had made an impact, one that would echo far beyond the badge he wore. Robert was laid to rest at the Western North Carolina Veterans Cemetery in Black Mountain, surrounded by the mountains he loved and the people who loved him. The flag draped over his casket was folded with reverence and placed in the arms of his widow, Jenny Bingaman, whose quiet strength mirrored his own. But Jenny wasn't content to let grief be the end of Robert's story. In the months that followed, she launched a community event in his honor, a spring 5K run and obstacle course challenge designed to unite police, fire, and rescue teams. It wasn't just a race. It was a promise that Robert's legacy would live on.